Hey everyone, and welcome to my indie devlog series where I share updates about Resonant Blade, a 2D action RPG. Last time, we looked at the game's storyline, and some new concept art and tile sets, and an introduction to the NPC and dialogue system. If you want to watch the previous episode or any of the older ones, you can find them all right up here. In this episode, I'll be going over some new items and equipment upgrades, the player's inventory system and interacting with shopkeepers, and some enemy updates like loot, enemy spawners, and a new invisible enemy type. From weapons to potions to tools to mounts, items can add a lot of structure and functionality to a game. The more I thought about what types of items the game needed, the more I started realizing it was time to add some more RPG elements into the game. I did go over some status effects from before, but I really needed to delve into the items and the stats and figure out how these systems would work in the game. And so there's the typical RPG equipment system where you go to the next town, you find better equipment, you buy it, you equip it, and now you're stronger all of a sudden. But I would rather focus on giving the player more decisions and choices as they progress. There's going to be 4 types of upgrade components that you can equip. An upgrade component for the Resonant Blade, called a Frequency Atmospheric Shift Emitter, or phase for short, an AV Augment upgrade, an Armor upgrade, and a Boots upgrade. The phase component is what will allow the player to access their limit breaks. If you have a particular phase equipped, let's say this one, then you'll have access to the Sonic Pulse ability. There will also be hybrid phase items later in the game where you can have access to more than one limit break at a time without having to change your equipment. The AV Augment upgrades will do things like increasing the AV field's range, or decreasing the repair time of the AV Augment when it's damaged in battle. The Armor upgrades will have some more standard effects like damage reduction or decreasing the duration of negative status effects from enemies. The Boots upgrades will have a direct impact on the player's dash ability with things like speed, energy cost, and other extra abilities. For the AV Augment, Armor, and Boots upgrades, there will be a direct sort of trade-off for whichever one that you choose. Let's take this Armor upgrade, Adrenal Vibroshock Lining, for example. While this may decrease the duration of negative status effects, it also reduces the player's max energy a little bit. And so with these equipment upgrades, I want to give the player more choice when it comes to deciding how they want to play and how they want to customize their character. So they're always weighing the advantages and disadvantages of these different items. Switching out upgrades will either have a somewhat long cooldown, maybe 30 seconds or a minute, or will only be possible in the lab where you craft these upgrades. I want the player to be able to change their equipment out and have the freedom and choice to do so, but not to be able to do it all the time. So it gives a little more weight to the decision that the player makes. The other thing about these upgrades is that you can only access them through crafting. Each one will require crafting materials that can be looted from enemies, found in chests, or bought from merchants. And the other item type that I plan on adding into the game will be consumables, one-time use items that will benefit the player in some way. With consumables, you'll be able to buy, loot, or craft these items. So after coming up with a list of items and item types and what they do, I wanted to get started on a player inventory system. And I ended up creating a simple design for a menu with an inventory page, a character page, and a settings page. The character and settings pages are pretty much just empty shells right now, with no real functionality. There are some player stats on the character page, but that's about it. The main one that is mostly functioning is the inventory screen. Items are laid out as a list with the item description in the middle of the screen. The right side is empty for now. But I do end up using the same menu layout for shopping screen, which I'll show you later. Pressing the action button on an item will make a little window appear showing the available actions for that item. For all items, you can either drop or move them. Dropping items destroys them and removes them from your inventory, freeing up an extra space in your bag. This may change to actually dropping the item on the ground so that it can be picked up again at a later point. Haven't really decided that yet. Moving items just moves them to a different slot in the inventory. For upgrades, a third equip action appears where you will be able to equip upgrades on the character. And moving on to Shopkeepers, I created a new NPC, Bill. He's a shady merchant who collects and sells rare items. And so you go up to the shopkeeper, you talk to them, and depending on whether you're in the buy or the sell window, these respective actions will appear in the action window when you select that item. And as in most standard simple RPG economies, sold items will only net you half of the item's value. I also added in a notification text system that appears in the top right corner. It displays any changes in the player's inventory, including items that are added or dropped, and when the character levels up. The fade animation is a little wonky at the moment. I still need to make sure that a new text object is created and its position is updated accordingly if multiple notifications are displayed. Right now it's just adding the text to one text box, so they fade in and fade out at the same time. And speaking of leveling up, I did throw that simple RPG element in here as well. It functions just like most RPG leveling up systems. You gain experience, your character increases their stats, and they get stronger. However, I might end up removing this once I have all the items and upgrades and equipment in place. I don't really want to create any unnecessary forms of character progression and stats if I can help it. A lot of RPGs go way overboard with this, I think, and it can get really complex without adding a lot of depth. That's something that I'll be constantly trying to balance as I integrate this RPG system into the game. So after coming up with an item database system and adding some of the items into the game, I added loot tables and drops from enemies. An enemy can have multiple possible drops, with each drop having a certain percentage of dropping. The sprites and images for the items are just filler for now, and I'll add in the art for those at a later point. I added in the first invisible enemy type to the game, Phantasms. The basic mechanic of this enemy type is that you will need to listen to detect its position and resonant frequency weakness. The resonant aura sound needs some updating for sure, and uniqueness for each enemy, I think. I also want to add some footstep sounds or something else to help indicate when it's closer and when it's farther away, other than just a simple increase in volume or decrease in volume. I think, like a footstep sound effect would be helpful, but also maybe some kind of LFO frequency modulation to the aura sound. So as they get closer, it might be something like something along those lines. So you'll not only hear it get louder, but kind of get faster too, to indicate, hey, this thing, whatever it is getting close to me. The Phantasm can use melee attacks against the player. The rate at which that happens still needs some tweaking right now, and the melee attacks can be parried though, which can lead to chord combos for the player. Every time you damage the Phantasm, it will randomly shift its resonant frequency, and this will prevent the fight from being too easy and force the player to constantly have to listen for the changes and adapt accordingly. The basic idea and mechanic for the invisible enemies are in place now, and I'm looking forward to seeing how these will impact the overall combat experience of the game so far. Some other changes I made with enemies is to make a colorless grayscale sprite version so that I can change their resonant weakness dynamically just by changing the sprite color and updating a few variables. So when I made the drone enemies, I actually recolored in every sprite for the 6 different colors, and so I basically have 6 different sprites instead of one colorless version that I just alter the color for. It just makes more sense to do a colorless version that can be changed on the fly. And I guess the snake boss already implements this idea with the segments and the head changing color, but I want this to be possible with all enemy types. That way I can get 6 enemies from one type. I added in colorless sprites for the slime enemies, and I just need to rework this for the drones, and make sure to do this for all future enemy types. And the last thing I wanted to show you about enemies are the monster spawners, or enemy spawners. Pretty self-explanatory, but a useful level design tool, I think, that'll come in handy later. And these are just game objects that I can place anywhere in the game world and type in the monster name and the max number of monsters that can be spawned from that point. So that's all the updates for this episode. I'm really trying to focus on getting a playable demo and plan out what elements of the game I'll absolutely need to accomplish that goal. I want the demo to have light elements of story, some character growth and progression through crafting upgrades, and teaching the player about the combat system through gameplay. If you like the video, please subscribe and leave a comment with any feedback or thoughts. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you next time.